iPhone 16e costs $600 and it doesn't make sense at all. It's one of the most unanimously hated phones by tech YouTubers online. Everybody is ranting about its price, lack of magsafe, 60Hz display, and so on. I'm not here to review this phone, say it's good or bad, but there are some things many tech YouTubers are missing. And I want to share my views and maybe who this phone might be for. Let's talk about who this phone is not for. If you're someone who looks at specs like processor cores and camera aperture, then this phone is not for you. If you say things like 60Hz OLED display, USB 3.0, this phone is not for you. If you have an iPhone 13 Pro or later, then this phone is not for you. If you take extensive photos and maybe professionally, this phone is not for you. People who are pretty upset online, most people fall under this category. But trust me, there is a large demographic who are outside these circles who just want to get their first iPhone and they want the cheapest and newest iPhone possible. For them, the 16e might be the phone. Just keep in mind, the 16e is the cheapest iPhone, but it's not budget iPhone. Okay, what about getting the iPhone 15 Pro used or refurbished instead of the iPhone 16e? I thought to myself for a second, if I had to buy an iPhone for my parents, would I buy the iPhone 15 Pro or this iPhone 16e? My choice was not immediately the iPhone 15 Pro. I'll tell you why. But that also means there is a small but definitely a place for this iPhone. Now let's talk some details. Let's start with the battery, which is one of the most important things for a non-techie like my parents. The battery life on the 16e is insane for its size. It has a larger battery too, compared to the iPhone 16 or iPhone 15 Pro. I use an iPhone 15 Pro and my husband uses an iPhone 16 Pro Max, and this 16e delivers a battery close to iPhone 16 Pro Max. I can comfortably get through a whole day without worrying about a dead phone. That is unbelievable in this small body. And I've said this before in my previous videos, the battery life on my iPhone 15 Pro sucks. I can't get through a whole day without charging twice or sometimes even thrice. If you like specs, the 15 Pro has close to 3200 mAh battery while the 16e has over 4000 mAh battery. That's again close to 25% more battery capacity. I FaceTime my parents daily, which also means that they talk the same amount of time, maybe even more. And I can understand the frustration that would cause them getting a Pro phone which cannot sustain for a day, and instead this 16e which will comfortably last them for a whole day. Now the camera. It just has a single camera on its back. It's a 48 megapixel camera. That should be terrible, right? No ultra wide, no 3x telephoto, no cinematic video, no action mode, no raw photos. That's a lot of missed features. Not just that, the single 48 megapixel camera on the back is not the same as the 48 megapixel camera on the 16 or 16 Pro. The 16 has sensor shift stabilization and the 16 Pro has an even advanced sensor shift stabilization and a larger sensor. Does that mean that the real world experience is bad, especially in low light? Well, I was surprised to see that the 16e's main camera holds up really well even with the 16 Pro Max main camera, even in low light. During daytime, the photos at 1x will almost look identical and no discernible difference. The only difference you might see, that too only with side-by-side comparison, is the background blur in close-up subjects. Since the 16e has a smaller sensor, if you're shooting close-up subjects, the natural background blur will be significantly less than the 15 Pro or 16 Pro. Otherwise, the camera holds up really well. During nighttime or low light, the 16e actually surprised me a few times. Why? It took better photos than the 16 Pro Max. How is that even possible? It took some experimenting to figure it out. You see, since the 16 Pro Max has sensor shift stabilization, it takes a quick snap and use software to correct the noise and details. The 16e, with its smaller sensors, it could turn on night mode and take long exposure photos. But this meant my 16 Pro Max photos had much less details than the 16e. Now, in some other conditions, the 16 Pro Max beat the 16e very easily, But I have to give credit to the 16E for holding up really well against other iPhones. For those who want ultra-wide on the 16E, there is a workaround. Just use the pano mode to capture the wide shots. Since the ultra-wide on 16 and 15 Pro is not as good as the main camera on the 16E, you might actually end up taking better photos on the 16E over the ultra-wide on others. Now, this doesn't help in all cases like moving subjects or videos, but some may get around this. I really miss the telephoto and macro modes though. Telephoto portraits look so much better than 1x or 2x portraits. But if 16 is not getting telephoto, 16E is definitely not getting it. I do want to call out one thing. The 16E looks beautiful, even more than the 16 or 16 Pro phones. There is no camera island, there are no multiple lenses that sticks out, the colors are subtle and classy. It gives me serious iPhone 4 vibes, and I can tell that this is the best looking phone in the iPhone 16 series. It feels very light in my hands too. Now, I want to address one big rant about this phone. Apple deliberately removed the MagSafe magnets on the back of this phone, and the internet is going wild. Let me ask you, how many of you watching this video are using your phones without a case? A survey says over 80 to 90% of iPhone users use it with a case. Even if your phone has MagSafe and if your case doesn't, the magnets in your phone are of no use, which means it's more important that you get your case with magnets over the phone. And it costs $10 for a MagSafe case. Well, this doesn't mean Apple should have given a phone without MagSafe in 2025. It was deliberate, of course. But no one complained when S24 Ultra, which cost over $1,300, was released last year without MagSafe. At $600, I can give it a pass, especially when most people use it with a case. Okay, I've been saying that this phone is for someone who just wants a new and cheap iPhone without bells and whistles. But there are some features lacking which should have been there even with that demographic. First, like I said, ultra-wide camera with macro mode. The panorama mode may help, but it cannot replace a proper ultra-wide, which many people have come to love. Next, the iPhone 16e lacks the ultra-wide band chip, which means it cannot be used in precision finding other Apple products or even this phone. A larger screen at $600, if Apple is aiming first-time iPhone buyers for an Android user switch, a larger display, which is very common in this price range for Android phones, is missing. It's not that I was expecting a larger phone from Apple, but it's something which might have softened the blow for the price. See, this iPhone 16e is not without its limitations. There are quite a few actually. It has one less GPU core, it has a notch instead of dynamic island, it has a 60Hz screen, it has slightly lower screen brightness, it has a smaller camera sensor, no action mode or macro, it has a slower wireless charging compared to 16, it has Wi-Fi 6 instead of Wi-Fi 7, no millimeter wave 5G. But in real world, except for the ultra-wide, it did not make a huge difference, at least for me. The 16e also has an Apple-built 5G modem, and I did not face any issue or difference compared to the 15 Pro. But on the bright side, it has the latest A18 chip, which will last for at least 5 years. A 48-megapixel main camera, which can take 2x photos, a very nice design, 4K video with slow-mo, and Apple Intelligence, which hope will get better with iOS 19. Having said that all, who is this phone for? In my opinion, this phone is for first-time iPhone buyers who are looking to move from Android and want the iPhone experience. Or if your whole family is on Apple ecosystem like iMessages, iCloud, Apple Photos, and you need a phone just to be in that ecosystem, 16e can be that phone. Okay, what's the bottom line? This iPhone is definitely not worth $600. But if you want the cheapest iPhone and you're not into specs, then this is the phone. Personally, even more than the refurbished iPhone 15 Pro because of the battery life. Trust me, in real world usage, you won't be missing out much. I've used both the iPhone 15 Pro and the 16 Pro Max, and at half the price of the iPhone 16 Pro Max, the 16e is not half as bad. But If you're into specs, finding the best value for your device, and okay to spend a little more, then the iPhone 15 Pro or 16 may be a better choice. If only the phone was $499 instead of $599.